am Ilavargan Murugan, and I will be moderating this session for this evening. Good evening to everyone in Singapore and the East, and hello and good morning to everyone from the West. A very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you all for taking the time on a Saturday evening to attend this event. This talk is recorded and will be uploaded later on the CSTC website and social media. Now, let's welcome Professor George Hart. It is indeed a rare opportunity for all of us to be able to listen to Professor George Hart. He's presenting this talk from Florida, and it is 8 a.m. for him. I'd like to thank him on behalf of CSTC, NLB, and all of you for adjusting his daily schedule to accommodate this talk. A few pertinent pointers about Prof George Hart. Professor Hart got his PhD in Sanskrit from Harvard University in 1971 and taught Sanskrit at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He fell in love with Tamil and studied Tamil under Professor A.K. Ramanujan, a multilingual scholar and prolific translator of classical works. Inspired by his professor, Professor Hart also became a multilingual scholar himself and translator of classical works. He was instrumental in founding the Tamil department at the University of California, Berkeley, and was its chair in Tamil studies till his retirement a few years ago. He is also a polymath, conversant in languages and literatures of Greek, Latin, Russian, French, and German. He has authored many books, to name a few. He has translated the Aranyakandam of Kamba Ramayanam as the forest book of Kamba Ramayanam, and that's definitely one of the reasons why he's an authority to talk about Kamban. He has written the first complete full English translation of Puranamur, the 400 poems from the Sangam age around 300 BC. And also the book, The Relationship Between Tamil and Classical Sanskrit Literature. Many of these books are available in our National Library in Singapore. He has been an independent early advocate of Tamil, being recognized as one of the world's classical languages for over 40 years. The official letter he wrote in 2000 to support the efforts of the Tamil Nadu government to have Tamil recognized as a classical language in India was released by the University of California, Berkeley. In 2004, the Indian government gave Tamil the status of classical language, and in its citation, it mentioned that Prof Hart's letter was one of the key documents that influenced this decision. Professor Hart will always have the appreciation and gratitude of every Tamil-speaking individual. And coming to today's talk, Kamban is introduced to many of us in the Tamil-speaking world, not as early as Avvayar, Thiruvalluvar, or Bharatiyar, mainly because the school syllabus does not teach or include Kamban in early years. The first phrase that introduced me to Kamban was in my teens, from the verse, Enna aru nalathinal enagal nanduri, Kannodu kanninai kavi, Ondrai ondru unnavum nelevaradu unarvum ondida, Annalum nokinan, Avalum nokinal. You would have all guessed the phrase, Annalum nokinan, Avalum nokinal. He saw her while she was also seeing him, referring to Rama seeing Sita, and Sita was also looking at him. It was the classic Tamil love phrase for the teens and the young. Slowly, other facets of Kamba Ramayana were introduced. In the Vali Vadai Padalam, which was in the school syllabus, Rama shoots an arrow at Vali hiding behind a tree. Vali asks a few uncomfortable questions. Vali being one of the negative characters, he says, Nandru Teedu என்று இயல் தெரி நல்லறிவு, இன்றி வாழ்வது அன்றோ விலங்கி நியல். நின்ற நல்லநெறி, நீ அறியா நெறி, ஒன்றுமின்மை உன் வாழ்மையை உணர்த்துமால். The gist being, I am a monkey, I know no rules. You are the enlightened, don't you know the rules? These questions instill a respect for the writer for giving such a strong set of lines to a negative character. And as for the play of words, I realized much later when I started writing scripts myself. Listen to these verses. Panjiyolir vinjukulir pallava manunga, senjaviya tanjam nevar seeradiyaalaagi, vanjiyena nanjamena vanjamagal vandal. Describing the transformation of Surpanaga to a beautiful, slender maiden. This uses meldinum or soft consonants of Tamil to elicit the beauty of the feminine. And when I'm talking about waking up the giant Kumbhakarna from his slumber, Uranguginra Kumbhakarna Ungal Maya Varvelam, Iranguginra Dindrigan Edundira Edundirai, Karangu Bola Virpidita Kaladudar Kayile, Uranguvai, Uranguvai, Inigidandu Uranguvai. He uses the tougher consonants or Vallinam to talk about the monstrous warrior. Which writer creates characters like this and plays with words and context with such mastery? I started realizing the greatness of Kamban, falling in love with his handling of the language and characters, giving dimensions to even his negative characters. And with the love and marvel, I am listening to this talk as a student, waiting as eagerly as all of you to listen to Prof Hart's points on what makes Kamban one of the world's great poets. Professor, with great pleasure, I invite you. The stage is yours.
Vanakkam. Today I think before we start, we need to put things a bit in perspective. India has as many people as North America and Europe put together, actually many more people. The languages of India are comparable in size and in richness to the European languages. Tamil is one of the major languages of the world. It's spoken by about as many people as live in France, and probably more. And the same is true of the other Indian languages like Telugu, Kannada, and so forth, Malayalam. But because of, so it's important for people to keep that perspective in mind, that Tamil is a major world language. It's not simply a small language hiding in the corner somewhere. It's like French or German or any of the major languages of Europe in its importance and in the number of people who speak it. The other thing about Tamil, which is extraordinary, is its age. It is one of the two oldest languages of South Asia, the other being Sanskrit, which is really not spoken anymore by much of anyone. Tamil is spoken by perhaps 75 million people all over the world. So let's now talk a bit about Kamban, who I feel is perhaps the greatest poet of South Asia. I don't know all the South Asian languages, obviously. So I say that as someone who knows Sanskrit and Tamil to an extent. But let's go on and see why I think Kamban is such a great poet. Now, you'll notice the Tamil versions of the text I use, they're broken, the words are broken. This is because the version I got was input many years ago by Professor Thomas Malton, and he wanted to be able to find all the words. So sometimes he even separated the words from their endings. So if it looks a little, if the Tamil looks not totally as you're used to, that's the reason. Now, I want to just to get some idea of Kamban in context. And here I'm going to compare him a little bit with Kalidasa. I'm going to start with the Kadavar, the invocation of the Aranya Kandam. Each of the Kandams in Kamban has a invocation to God. And this particular one all of these are magnificent. And they bring to mind the depth and the profundity of the Upanishads. There are not many things in Indian literature that can do that. The Upanishads are extraordinary body of work. And here we have Kamban, a great poet, writing as if he were an Upanishadic writer. Let's go on and talk about this verse. Pediyada nimir peda uruvam pirarhila odi unarandorum unarchi udavam vedam vedya vridinshan mudaror terihila adinadar avaryam arivinukkarivaro. And what this means is, under every different form, he is the same. Though they branch out, in him they are one. And only through him do men finally understand words they have recited over and over. He is the primal Lord whom no Vedas, no Brahmins or gods have comprehended. O knowledge for our knowing. And this play on knowledge is a very profound one, but we don't have time now to go into it. The whole notion of jnanam in Sanskrit and arivu here in Tamil is a very profound one. Now, I just wanted to read one of Kalidasa's. Actually, I think we better move on because otherwise we won't have time to get through enough. Let's see. In his Ramayana, it's common for Indian poets, both in Sanskrit and in Tamil, to start out by saying how unworthy they are. And when this is really the point, one of the points I want to make about Kamban. He has at the beginning of his great Ramayana, he has an Avayadakam. And this Avayadakam is absolutely unexpected. Let's just for a second. Okay, so let me just give one from Kalidasa. Beautiful, beautiful verse at the beginning of Raghuvamsha. Kwasurya prabhavo vamsha kwachalpa vishaya matihi titirshur dustaram mohad urupenasmi sagaram. What is my mind of such small scope next to that lineage from the sun? Because that's Raghuvamsha, the line of Raghu. I am one who would cross the great ocean in only a small raft. Now, this is a beautiful verse. It's very elegant. But it's also, it uses a very standard image. And this is the way Kalidasa works. He is the epitome of elegance. And his verses are often otherworldly. They're about gods and demigods. And you enter into them and you enter into a world of calmness and beauty where everything is, it's like another world. It's not like this world. Now let's go back to Kamban. So here is Kamban's Avayadakam. Ose petruir patkaralutrur puse mutravam nakubu pukkana ase patri arayalutrin matrik kasil kutratiraman kadayaro. As if I were a cat that sees the ocean of milk roaring with rising waves and goes to lick it all up. Overcome with desire, I have begun to tell this story of the victorious, faultless Rama. Now, what Kamban does all through his work is he brings in things which are totally unexpected. This is not something that you would expect in an Avayadakam. You expect something more standard, like what Kalidasa does. But this is not. This is something that sticks in your mind. And look how it starts. Ose Petroir Padkadalutra. Now, this Ose Petroir Padkadalutra is, if you think about it, he's talking about the story of Rama. And it's like an ocean of milk, which is suddenly starting to roar and raise its waves up. In other words, it's come to life. And that's what he's really saying about this story he's about to tell, that it's coming to life. Now, let's talk about what makes really great poetry. It has to stand the test of time. It has to avoid simple hackneyed expression and linearity, which we saw in that Avayadakam. It has to sum up the civilization that the poet lives in. It has to describe the entire gamut of emotions and experience. And it has three elements: description, drama, and a profound innovative use of imagery. In the West, we have so-called really basic literature, the great works of the West, which have always been cited are Homer, Virgil, and Dante. And in India, I see one of them as being the Vyasa Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is an amazing work, and I'm not going to talk about it now. And also Kamban's Ramavadaram, that is his Ramayana. So let's go on and actually look at some of the work is enormous. It contains 10,534 poems. It has all the kandas of the Valmiki version except for the Uttarakandam. Each poem contains beginning rhyme, which is a feature of Tamil poetry. It's also found elsewhere. The meter changes to reflect the content. This is something we don't find in, well, we do sometimes find it in Sanskrit, not in a work like Valmiki's. And unlike in Valmiki, Rama is divine. He's an avatara of Tirumal, who is ultimately God, as the invocation suggests. In some places, Rama seems fully human, while in others he is portrayed as fully divine. His work spans all the human emotions, and it's filled with remarkable insights into the human condition. So let's look at some of the selections from the Aranyakandam, which Hank Heifetz and myself translated many years ago. So we will start now. What I'm doing here is just, there are many, many beautiful verses here. I'm just picking a few just to give you a sense of how the work works, of how Kamban works. We start with description, the Godavari River. And Rama and Lakshmana are walking, and they walk through the Godavari River. Or I'm not through the river, but they walk and see this beautiful river. Bhuviyana Kaniyai Andhra Porul Tand Pulatitrahi Aviyahatturei Haltangi Aindinei Neriyalave Saviura Telindu Tan என்று ஒழுக்கமும் தழுவி சான்றோர் கவியன கடந்த கோதாவரியினை வீரர் கண்டார். And here Kamban does something very wonderful. He uses what's called silede in Tamil, shlesha in Sanskrit, where words have two meanings. For example, the word poror in the second line means both wealth and meaning, because he's comparing the river to a poem. And the heroes saw the river Godavari, which was like the poems of the great poets, a sublime ornament for the earth with fields of profound wealth, and its episodes that are watering places for rescue from the heat, with its flow through the 5 landscapes of poetry, clear and lovely and sweetly running. And there we've tried to get a sense of how each one of these words has 2 different meanings. Another one, Vandurai Kamala Chevi, Valmuham Poliavasam, Undurai Kuvalai Unkan, Urungura Noki Urin, Tendisei Karatin Vari, Tirumalar Tuvi Selvar, Kandari Panivadenna, Olinda the Kadavul Yare. And here Kamban talks about the river as if it were a woman, with her bright face glittering, gracious as a lotus where the bees gather, and the glowing eyes of her water lilies that absorb and hold the sweet fragrance, while her hands, the clear waves, one after another, were picking up and scattering beautiful flowers. The holy river shone as if bowing at the noble sight of them. So there's a beautiful verse of description. Now, we come to Surpanaga, and Kamban is full of fascinating episodes. For example, the episode of the Kishkinda Kanda with the monkeys. Surpanakha is the sister of Ravana, as everyone knows, Shurpanakha in Sanskrit. And what happens here is kind of subtle, because I think one way to see this section is suddenly to see Lanka as the world, and to see this outside element of Rama and Lakshmana and Sita entering into this normal world. In other words, the normal world is a place, well, here it's ruled by a Rakshasa, and certainly sometimes our world is ruled by people who are like Rakshasas. But I think Kamban is looking at Lanka in a way as if it were the world, and suddenly divinity comes into it. Shurpanakha is wandering around the same place that Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita are, and she sees Rama, and she is just she's entranced by him, and she falls in love with him, and she decides she wants to have him, and she wants to seduce him, and as she says, she wants to have a Gandharva marriage with him, which means, well, I think you all know what a Gandharva marriage means. So she turns herself from a Rakshasi into a beautiful woman. Pangaya Chevye Manat Pavaya Angayanaya Mandirate Aindanar Tingalin Sirandolir Muhattal Sevier Pongoli Visumbinil Polia Tondrinal. She visualized the goddess Shri sitting on the lotus, uttered a mantra she had in her power, and appeared as a beautiful woman, her face shining brighter than the moon, and the radiance of her rose glowing into the sky. And then the verse that we just heard, which is one of the very famous verses in all of Tamil. And here the seductiveness of this woman appears. It's just an amazing verse. Panjiole vinjukule pallavamanunga senjaviya kanjam nimit siradiyavi amjolila manyayana annamena minnum vanjiyana nanjamena vanjamahar vandal. And what Kamban is, okay, let's read the translation. All the loveliness of bright red cotton and cool shoots were shamed by her as she moved on her small feet like graceful red lotuses, with words that were sweet like a young peacock, a wild goose, a swaying vanji vine, like poison, the wily woman came. That was, the English gets some of it, but if you look at the alliteration, when it's saying how lovely it is, it's saying na, manyayana, annamena, minnum, and then suddenly we get this nya, vanjiyana, nanjamena, vanjamahal. It's obviously an extraordinary verse. Now let's move on. Now Shurpanakha approaches Rama to seduce him, and this section is interesting because, of course, Rama ultimately is Tirumal. He's God himself, and he's simply playing as an avatar, as Rama. But that doesn't bother Shurpanakha. So let's just read some more of these. Ponnorhu puvilori puveyeral puve, pinneril korvaljene pirandolir mohator, kannieril kondadu kalaitada maniter, Min arivil tanmayadu vinirivadenna. Beautiful as Shri on her flower, flowing gold like a streak of lightning, fallen never to vanish out of the sky with her jeweled chariot, fresh as that of a young girl and softly clothed, and her shining face, the swords of her eyes like a lovely myna bird. Kanan uyir karpaham uyirta kadir valli, meninani petravile kamam nirevasat, tenin muriut Trinia Sevinani Petror, Manin Viri Petramail Vanda Dena Vandal. She came as if a peacock were coming, with eyes like a deer, of a sweet, abundant beauty, with a perfumed honey of words that would draw out desire for her who had taken a body just like the Valli, glowing vine of heaven, given its life by the tall and fragrant wish-granting tree. Shurpanaka goes up to Rama and she says, she basically propositions him. She says, I want to have a Gandharva marriage to you. She tries to make him, and he says, look, I can't have anything to do with Rakshasas. And besides, you're a Brahmin and I'm not. And then because Ravana is a Brahmin. And so, there's no way we can have a marriage. And Shurpanaka says, well, no, I'm only half Brahmin and one of my parents wasn't a Brahmin and so forth. So she goes on and she tries to get Rama to basically as her lover. And here's another thing she says. Munivaro Dodayer Munne Mudirpahai Muraimai Nokar Taniye ni Adalal Matravarodum Taruvadar Kota Vinayam Either Allada Illai Vinnum Nin Achiaki Yiniyarai Annar Vandun Yevalin Nirpar Yendral. For long now, the Rakshasas who know nothing of what is right have shown intense anger toward all who do tapas, and you live alone. It is right for you to form a friendship with them in this way. They will give you command of the heavens, and with pleasure they will come to stand by you, waiting for your orders. What Rama's reply here is very interesting. This is why I put this in, because he replies sarcastically, which is very interesting. This is not something you see in Sanskrit kavyas very much. This kind of extraordinary sarcasm that Rama unleashes on her. Nirudhartam arulum petrain, ninnalam petrain, Ninnod Urvarum Selvatti Yandum Urayavum Petrain Undro Tirunahar Tirda Pinner Seitavam Payanda Dayanna Varisilai Vadita Tolan Valeriyalanga Nakkan. I have received the grace of the Rakshasas and you with all your power of delight. I have received wealth I will never lose. And not only that, but the tapas I have done since leaving my lovely city has here borne fruit, he said, whose arms held a cocked bow. And he laughed at her with his bright, flashing teeth. If you think about this, this is really quite an amazing way that Rama responds to her. Now, then Shurpanaka is spurned by Rama. He doesn't want anything to do with her, but she's absolutely, totally in love with him. And she longs for him. Aha, kongayan ayanan ranjan mehatai taruvum avai vendana poha kandu pulambum appunmayal mohatakor mudivum mundangolo. Rama, remember, is black. He's usually pictured as blue for some reason, but he's in Kamban, he's described in one place as a karu nyayiru, a black sun. And so when she sees a cloud, it reminds her of Rama. As a black cloud passed, she tried to press it to her breasts, imagining it was her Lord. And when she saw those clouds warming up and dissolving, she would weep. Was there any end to that unholy woman's delusion? And then a beautiful verse, Ori Vemkanal Utranalottamav Vere Avi Irandilal Yenbaral Ariane Adaindanal Pinnayum Varalam Enumase Marundine. Though it seemed as if she were caught in the blazing fire that consumes the universe, that mindless woman did not lose her life, saved by the drug of her desire to have that man with his body the color of the dark ocean, and then to live. And here, Kamban very subtly points out that because she loves Rama so much, and Rama is God, she doesn't die. So this is sort of implied in this verse. Now we come to the disfiguring of Shurpanakha. Everyone knows this story that Lakshmana cuts off her nose and disfigures her. This, incidentally, is it's an old idea in Indian literature. There's a Buddhist story I read once in the Divyavadana about, which is very similar to this. So it's interesting to see these ideas coming up. She sees Sita, and when she sees Sita, she becomes incredibly jealous. And so this section describes what happened when she sees Sita alone. Tani irundanar, samaindada en sindane, tarvutru இனியிருந்தனக்கு எண்ணுவதில் என்ன துணியிருந்த வல்மனத்தினள் தோகையை தொடர்ந்தாள் கனியரும் பொழில் காத்தையில் இருந்தவன் கண்டான். Notice how dramatic this is. She's been left alone. What I wished for is happening. No reason to think now or hold back or delay, she thought, her cruel heart filling with jealousy, and she moved after that woman who is as beautiful as a peacock, while in the grove that was large and filled with fruit, Lakshmana, there to protect, saw her coming. We get a very disturbing verse, to tell you the truth, but it shows the range of Kamban's poetry. I don't think in all of Sanskrit there is a verse I've seen. No, I haven't read all of Sanskrit, obviously, but of the things I've seen, I've never seen anything like this, which distills violence in such a realistic way. And note what he says, Niladi. That's exactly what a villager would say today. I mean, it's amazing. This is not Lakshmana talking like Lakshmana. He's very angry. Nilladi ena karuginan pennenanindan villerad aval vayangeriyamena virinda silval odiyai kongayil tirunukura patri Olay ஈர்த்து உதைத்து ஒளிகிளர் சுற்று வார் உருவி ஊக்கி தாங்கி விண்பரர்வென் என்று உருத்து எழுவாளை நூக்கி நோய்தனின் வேதிழையேர் என நுவலா மூக்கும் காதும் வெண்முரண் முலை கண்களும் முறையால் போக்கி போக்கிய சினத்தொடும் புரிகுழல் விட்டான். You stop, he shouted, hurrying toward her, deciding not to take his bow since this was a woman. And with his fine hand, he seized her strong, thick hair that was welling out like a glowing fire, and dragging her down by it, he kicked her, and then he drew out his curving sword that flashed radiance. In anger, she tried to get up, thinking to hold him back by strength and escape into the sky. But easily Lakshmana pulled her down, and saying these words, "Don't make people suffer," he cut off first her nose, then her ears, then the nipples of her hard, burning breasts, and his own anger then cut off. He released her hair. This is a very disturbing verse, to put it mildly, but it's also very realistic. And it shows you how Kamban masters all of the human emotions. Uyaram vennidai mannidai verum kadanduraikum ayarum kaikulain alamarum ஆருயிர் சோறும் பெயரும் பெண் பிறந்தேன் பட்ட பிழை என பிதற்றும் துயரும் அஞ்சி முன் தொடர்ந்திலா தோல்குடி பிறந்தாள். This is an interesting verse because of what she says. She leaped into the air, fell to the earth, and lay there in her suffering, throwing her arms around and growing weak. She fainted away and woke up, screaming, "What sin have I done for this misery of being born a woman?" She, with her ancient lineage that sorrow itself had feared even to approach. Now, I want to go a bit forward because I don't think we have time to read all of these. I do have here, just to show you Kamban's extraordinary ability with words, just a description of a battle. This is when Kara fights with Rama, and Kara and his army of Rakshasas. Sulamatrana vatrana sodar muruttohaival, Mulamatrana vatrana borantande pindi, Palamatrana vatrana pahari vempahuvai, Velumatrana vatrana villodu pallam, Todi tunindana tolodu tomaram tuninda, Adi tunindana kadavai kalirachodu nedundir, Kodi tunindana kurgadam tunindana kulama, Kudi tunindana Mulayode tunindana musadam. And I'll just read the first one. The tridents were broken and the bright axes were broken. The swords and masses were broken off at the hilt. The great maces were broken. The hurling missiles were broken. Then the arrows with cruel edges that tear were broken. Spears broken, bows and pallam arrows broken, and so forth. Let's go on. And then we won't read Dushana. This is interesting where Dushana blames the when Kara's troops get scared and stop fighting, he tries to make them fight. But I want to go to Ravana, because Ravana he's a great character. You know, this has often been said in Paradise Lost, in Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan is the most interesting character. And in this part of the Ramayana, Ravana comes across as a fascinating character. He really comes to life. And he comes to life really like a godfather. You know, I think most of people here have probably seen the movie The Godfather, one of the greatest movies ever made. And you can see Ravana being like the godfather here. He's like a gangster, but he's got all the power in his hands. So what happens is Shurpanakha returns to Lanka. And this beautiful series of magnificent verses come at this point. She disfigured. Remember, she's the wife of the sister of this person who has unlimited power, and here she's been disfigured in such a terrible way by Lakshmana. Iraitannarum padayarakkar irundadanai marandanar Poriramam Tunga Varai Puyattinadai Kadanda Pera Sai Manam Kavatra Atralaki Tirai Paravai Perahari Tirunahari Kadidori Sidai Tanai Uraipen Nena Surpanagai Vara Irundan Irunda Parisu Uraitum Manu. What Kamban does here is just amazing. And notice the use of the word mano. Mano, it doesn't have a English or Sanskrit equivalent. It simply is an exclamation that means it's all gone now, no more, it doesn't exist. Roaring, the demons with their huge army had died, but Shurtbanakai forgot them as her great hunger to lie between the arms like high mountains of the warrior Rama tortured her beyond endurance. And she thought, running as quickly as I can to the opulent city whose moat is the ocean waves, I will tell him about the beauty of Sita. And as she was coming toward the city, I will describe Ravana's royal state that now has vanished. Manu. So just as we go on, Sita has in her mind, in order to get Rama, she's going to tell her brother about Sita, and so that he falls in love with her, and that will help her get Rama. And Ravana in his court. Nilayala Vulhinade Nirpanavum Nadapanavum Nerian Inda Malarin Mel Nanmuhatkum Vahupparide Nunipadore Varambil Atral Ulaivila Vahai Urenda Tarumam Mena Ninainda Yellam Udavum Tachan Pulanelam Teripadore Punayani Mandapam Avanil Polia Manu. In this world where nothing can last, in that hall built by Takshan, surpassing even the power of Brahma, who's sitting on a flower created in rhythmic order, all that moves or is rooted in place, in the hall of a builder able to make whatever was imagined, beautiful with jewels and reflecting endless knowledge, like righteous action done in great care, performed without any fault and showing limitless strength. There Ravana reigned in a shining style that now has vanished. Beautiful. This is just so beautiful. Puvian Adalodeanum Ponade Ponendanum Puvinanum Nalium Valatar Allar Devarin Yingu Yavar Yeni Natalavar Melium Mide Tadikum Mulai Veyalantol Se Arikan Vendri Madar Valian Adum Bulaveyanum Panangada Mahudam Nirevayanga Mando. Not Shiva who wears the tiger skin, not Vishnu in his golden robe, nor Brahma who is seated in the flower had the strength left to destroy him. Then where else among the gods could he meet with any danger? And toward his women who were fashioned to win victories with their thin waists, their ripe breasts, their lovely red lines in their eyes, their arms like young bamboo, his gleaming row of crowns now vanished, had never gone begging. Anyway, that gives you an idea of these. Here's a nice one. Annavan Amaichare Noki Andor Nalmori Paharinum Narangum Sindayar Yenne Golpane Yana Yeranjum Yeranja Hindranar Kinnarar Perumbayam Kadanda Nenjina. If he happened to look at a minister and speak even one pleasant word, the Kinnara kings, quivering within, would say, "What is it? What is your order?" and bow down as fear lay heavy in their hearts. So this is how Ravana is in his courts. And of course, Irundana, Ulangal Yerandum Mondrum Tan Arundavam Udaimayin Alavil Atralil Purundiya Iravanan Uruva Karmuha Karuntadan Kannir Kannin Vellate. He was sitting there without any limit to his strength, and the three worlds were his through a power he had earned by long and harsh tapas. In the flood of large dark eyes under curving eyebrows of his women, Ravana was bathed. So there this is beautiful. He's sitting there and he's just enjoying these beautiful women, and suddenly, Tangayum, Avarittalayil Tangiya Sengayal, Soriyin Tare Sendiri Kongayal, Mukinar Kuray Il Kadinar, Mangulin Nolippada Tiranda Vayanar, Mudayuday Vayanal, Murayit Kadayuham Kadalole Kata Kanduvar, Urattisai Sekarin Senda Kundalar, Vadadisai Vayalin Vande Tonrinar. And his sister, as she now was, holding her red hands above her head, her breasts joined into a single stream of blood, and her nose bleeding, and no earrings on her ears, her mouth opening into a howl like a thundercloud, blazing with an anger that might have been the sound of the ocean at the end of a universe, with her mouth smelling like rotting meat, with her hair as red as the twilight dying in the west, appeared moaning at the northern gate. Rakshasis especially always have red hair. Yendra Yanaya Vantuyar Yalangai Naharieda Nindravar Yurundavaroda Odum Neriteda Kundrinadi Vandupadi Kondalana Manan Pontini Karum Kural Vrindanar Purandal. Now you have heard how this fierce suffering entered Lanka, and everyone in Ravana's hall looked for somewhere to run to as she fell at the dark anklets dense with gold of the king, like a cloud striking the foot of a mountain, rolling there in pain. And so what does Ravana do? Virinda valayangal midaitor padara meedittu எரிந்த நயனங்களேரின் புறம் எரிப்ப நெறிந்த புருவங்கள் நெற்றியினை முற்ற திரிந்த புவனங்கள் வினை தேவரும் அயர்த்தார். His arms coated with shining bangles swelled up, his eyes burned, the spaces between his teeth burned, his eyebrows curved in anger across his great forehead, and nothing was stable. The gods forgot their duties. Tendisai namantanodum tevar kulamellam indiridi vandada namakkana irunda நின்றுடல் நடுங்க உயர் வெம்மி நிலை நில்லாது ஒன்று முறையாடலில் உம்பரினோடின்பர். The whole clan of the gods and even Yama of the south of the dead sat there thinking, today is our last day. Their bodies were shivering, their breaths were sobs. Gods and human beings waited without saying a word. மடித்த மிளவாய்கள் தோறும் வந்து புகை முந்த துடித்த தொடர் மீசைகள் சுருக்கொள உயிர்ப்ப கடித்த கதிர் வாழேறு மின் கனல மேகத் இடித்து உருமொத்தது உரறி யாவர் செயல் என்றார். And here we have the Godfather, as he sighed so fiercely that all his mustaches quivering in a row sent the smell of burning hair from the caves of his mouth, as his shining teeth were gnashing, burning, glowing with lightning. He said, who did this? Like the menacing thunder out of a cloud. In other words, how extraordinary. She's there. He doesn't sit there and say, what happened? What's wrong? How come you look like that? He doesn't say that. He said, okay, who did it? Which is what the Godfather would have said, I suspect. கானிடைய தைந்து புவி காவல் புரிகின்றார் மீனுடை நடுங்கொடியினோ நனையர் மேற்கீழ் ஊன்கடை உடம்புடைமையோர் உவமை இல்லார் மானிடர் தடிந்தனர்கள் வாளுருவி என்றார். And she said, they came to the forest and they protect the earth. They are as beautiful as the God of love. Their bodies have no equal in this or higher worlds of embodied beings. They who drew out their swords and cut me this way, they were men. And Ravana laughs. Seidanar manida, yanati sayanaitum, yedana haivandadari. ஏதனை வந்ததெறி சிந்தன கண்ணெல்லாம் நோய்தலர் வலி தொழில் வன்ற மொழியொன்றோ பொய்தவேர் பயத்தையொழி பூக்க புகழ் என்றான். Men did this to you, he said, and his laughter spilled out of him, filling every direction of space, and all his eyes shed fire, of course, with amazing powers. Now, how can that be true? Don't lie, don't be afraid. Tell me what really happened. So anyway, we don't have time to do all of this. But Sita says, okay, now you can have Sita and I will take Rama. And so Ravana falls in love with Sita. And as Ravana, he forgets everything. He forgets Kara, he forgets even forgets the shame of his sister who's been disfigured because he's totally obsessed with Sita. He starts pining away with love for Sita. And he can't stand. Now, Ravana has control over everything. He has control over the seasons. He has control over time. So Kamban goes through a series of extraordinary poems where Ravana asks to bring the spring and different seasons. And when spring comes, he can't stand spring. Or he suffers in the cold season because he can't stand that. And then he suffers in the spring and he can't stand the spring. And he suffers in the autumn, he can't stand that. And so finally, all the seasons go away. And we have a beautiful poem, the second poem here, which just is extraordinary. Vanpane maramum tia malayhalum kulira arum menpane yerinda dendral venale vilambalamo anbenum vidam undare atralam marundumundo என்பமும் துன்பம் தானும் உள்ளத்தோடு ஐந்தவன்றே. So let's look at this one, the next one. கூலத்தார் உலகமெல்லாம் குளிர்பொடு விதுப்பும் நீங்க நீலத்தார் அரக்கன் மேனி நெய் இன்றி எரிந்ததன்றே. காலத்தால் வருவதொன்றோ காமத்தால் கமலும் வெந்தி சீலத்தால் அவிவதன்றே செய்யத்தான் ஆவதுண்டோ. This is a beautiful verse. All the world encircled by the shores of ocean was without heat, without cold, but the body, like a dark jewel of the Rakshasa, burned with no oil to feed it. Was it because of the seasons that it burned? How can the raging fire that rises from desire be quenched by any action other than the force of self-control? So let me just, we won't do all of these things, but I want to end with Sharabhanga. Sharabhanga is a sage. This actually comes at the beginning of the Aranyakandam. And Sharabhanga has been doing tapas, that is fierce meditation, for endless amounts of time. And he finally is at the stage where he can go leave this world. And Indra comes to him and says, okay, you've made it, Sharabhanga. You can come to my world and you will be like Indra in that world, and you'll have everything you ever wanted. And Sharabhanga answers, he says, and he actually talks to Rama because Rama is telling him about this world he can go to. And he says, Sol ponga perum puharoi, toril mai sirpangalin vivana serkuveno, arpam karudenara arundavamo, karpam palasendra kanudiyao, sirkalayala nilayo tiriya, kuruga neduga gunum vera pada, Urukal kilar pudam la muginum maruga nerieduven vanudayai. And these are very beautiful verses. O you whose fame foams up in the words of men, shall I become part of things that perish like paintings when their color fades? I have no wish at all for something so slight. Do you see the tapas I have endured as the eons pass? Ruler of the heavens, I will reach that place which is imperishable, even when every being is swept away in the great wind, a place that is utter purity, no growth, no lessening, the unchanging state beyond the smallness of time. This is a beautiful, beautiful verse. And then finally, now after Shadabhanga has entered the fire with his wife and entered into this state, which is beyond any change, Indra comes and he praises Rama. And he praises Rama with beautiful verses. And the reason I'm ending with this is because ultimately Kamban's Ramayana it centers around the avatar of Rama. And Rama sometimes becomes very human, but ultimately he's not. And this is what Indra says about Rama. Medadavarillai, mevinarumillai, vilayodurulillai, melkirumillai, muvamayillai, மூத்தமையுமில்லை முதலிடையோடீரில்லை முன்னோடு பின்னில்லை தேவா எங்கிவ்வோ நின் தோன்று நிலை என்றால் சிலை ஏந்தி வந்து எம்மை சேவடியில் நோவ காவாதோழியன் பழி பெரிதோ அன்றேல் கருங்கடலில் கண் வளராய் கைமாறும் உண்டோ. If you know Tamil, this verse is simply magnificent. Putting it in English is not so easy, but here's our attempt. There are no enemies for you, and there are no friends, neither light nor darkness, no up and no down, not youth or old age, no beginning or middle or end, no before and no after, O God. If I have described you as you are and have always been, while you come now with your bow troubling your beautiful feet, if you were not to protect us, what blame could cling to you, or what recompense for your favor, dark sleeper on the ocean of milk? And so we get some sense of how Kamban has introduced amazing amounts of drama and just every conceivable thing into his great work. I hope that gives just a slight idea of how extraordinary this work is. Remember that it runs over 10,000 verses, and all of the verses are very good. One really wonders how any human being could have done such a thing in their life. So anyway, with that, we can end. And I don't know if people have, go ahead, you can see if, you can see if people have questions.
Thanks, Professor. That was really stimulating and inspiring. If Kamban compares himself to the cat that's actually standing in front of the ocean of milk, I think you literally took us through this ocean of milk. I think we all swam in the ocean of milk of the beautiful Tamil in your own words. It's fantastic. One of Kamban's distinctive aspects is his handling of the characters. which is actually quite different from that of Valmiki, especially the negative characters, giving them more personality, giving them more dimensions, and not making them all evil. I want to understand your thoughts on whether it is just artistic liberty or Kamban's personal stance, or does it have anything to do with the social construct and the fact that the Valmiki Ramayana is almost 1,000 years older than the Kamba Ramayana?
You know, the problem with comparing Valmiki and Kamban is it's like comparing apples and oranges. They're just so radically different in their approach and what they're doing. Valmiki is basically telling a story, and he's making Rama and Sita into moral exemplars, whereas Kamban is more interested in my opinion, in really the as he says several places, the fact that the world is a very strange place, and that all sorts of strange things happen, and that the ultimate reality is something we cannot even remotely imagine, and that this ultimate reality intrudes in ways which are completely completely beyond our understanding. And I don't think Kamban is as concerned with making Rama and Sita, moral objects of just moral integrity. It's more complex than that, because he's interested in how does the divine, how does the ultimate reality affect the world? And the way it affects the world are ways which often seem even unfair, as in the Vali episode. And yet that's what happens. And so and this is incidentally the mark of a great artist, that not simply to take a sort of prepackaged view of things and say, oh, everything is just wonderful, but to look at the world as it is, with all of its suffering, all of its imperfections, and to try to understand in some way, which is ultimately beyond words, why it's like that and how we should respond to it. And of course, Rama is he's not an evil character. He's simply beyond human understanding. He's obviously also an exemplar of goodness in Kamban, but as you pointed out, not always.
I have a question from Mr. Gopalan Balakrishna in the chat. He says Kalidasa's Raghuvamsa is at least 5 centuries older than Kamban's. Probably Kamban had read it. Does any clue found to this effect in Kamban's work?
The erudition of Kamban is really something, because he knew things of Indian lore, which we have to go to his work to sort of dig out and understand. I would think certainly he knew of Kalidasa, and did he know Sanskrit? That's a question. We don't know. I mean, we know so little about Kamban, unfortunately, that I wish we knew more, but we don't. And so, where did this person come from? People even argue about when he lived. The one thing which seems certain is he lived during the time of the great Cholas, and when the amazing bronzes were being cast and things like that. So it was a time of just one of the great cultural flourishings that ever happened in South Asia, and Kamban was part of it. My guess is he did know of. He certainly must have known of Kalidasa, I would think. But there's nothing in his work that tells us that.
Very interesting to contest the thought process. Having translated Sanskrit to Tamil, So if he didn't know the original language, did someone actually help him? But like you said, we will never know. There's another question from Dr. Chandrika Subramaniam, who's also into translating. So she wants to know what challenges you might have faced in translating Kamban.
The biggest challenge in translating Kamban is, well, first of all, to bring it into English. You know, I have a book of Raghuvamsha, which someone did in Tamil, and he gives the Tamil version of all of the Sanskrit verses. And the Sanskrit comes into Tamil very easily, whereas when we try to put it in English, it's much harder. So bringing this Tamil into English, the first thing that one wants to preserve is the flow, because Kamban, Kamban's language, as Hank Heifetz would said, it flows like a river, and somehow you have to get that sense into English, and it's very difficult to do. Hank, who really did the English of this for the most part, is a poet and a novelist. So he's very good with English, and he knows Latin and Greek, and he also has studied Sanskrit. It was interesting doing it with him because he knew Tamil up to a point, and I was helping him with the meaning, and he would recite the verses, and when he recited the verses, it didn't sound like Tamil. It sounded like Icelandic or something. It was quite strange because, he really wasn't versed in Tamil. His Sanskrit is much better. But what was amazing to me was that in spite of this, he got the rhythms right. He was able to bring the rhythms over. And I think that's the critical thing, because without the rhythms, Kamban could be quite dry. You have to somehow make it come to life. And what makes it come to life is how the words fit together, how the rhythms come, and also, of course, how you manage to translate things so they don't sound too strange in English. For example, English has no word for tapas, so we just use the Sanskrit word, the Tamil word tavam, which is obviously borrowed from the Sanskrit. So those are, but the challenges of translating this into English, which gives some sense of the rhythms of Tamil, it's quite a challenge. And I don't take credit for it, incidentally. It's Hank did it.
I think you are following the same Avai Adakam of Kamban. Prof, next, next we have Mr. Arun, the godfather of CSTC. So, Mr. Arun.
Okay, thank you, Ryan, for giving me the opportunity. And Prof Hart, I join many others in thanking you for a wonderful presentation. I want to ask you something about the Western epics. I'm sure you're very familiar with that. If you compare Homer's epics and the Indian epics, are there fundamental differences in storytelling, either in structure or in approach, or even in characterization? Do the Indians tell a very different, do they tell it very differently from the European epic traditions?
Well, in one word, yes. but to
can you highlight perhaps one or two most salient differences?
Well, let's take the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata, as someone said, has often been said, it revolves around the Gita. But there's nothing like that in any of the Western epics. I mean, maybe if you look at Milton, Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, there's a bit of something like that. But but the way in which, and in Kamban also, the way in which the actions of the characters and the actions of the epic are in some way connected to the other world and to the ultimate meaning of life is something that you don't see so much in the West. The Western epics are, well, of course, the Iliad is mainly an epic of war, and the Odyssey is a wonderful story. And there are gods and goddesses there, but you don't so much get that. The one place which I've seen something like that is in the Oedipus series of Sophocles, and at the end, it becomes quite profound, but that's not an epic, it's a play. But for the most part, no, there's a difference in the two traditions, and it's a pretty basic difference, I think.
Thank you.
There is a question from Mr. Lakshmanan. Which version of Ramayana spread to the Southeast Asia or had a greater impact? Valmiki or Kamba Ramayana?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because we had a student who was studying the Ramayana in, what language was it? I think Malay. There were some versions, and it looks as if they were more influenced by Kamban than by Valmiki. There were some names and other things which make it clear that Kamban is what they seem to be following. But again, this is something which, someone would have to really sit down and figure it out. And I'm not sure anyone has done that to date. But certainly Kamban had influence in Southeast Asia, which makes sense, incidentally, because the Tamil people were trading with Southeast Asia for centuries, and they would have brought Kamban, and maybe and incidentally, there's another interesting thing. One of Stuart Blackburn knew it many years ago, was a student of ours, and became a really fine scholar. One of his books, I forget the name of it, is about it's in Kerala, and in Bhagavati temples, they actually read and perform the Kamba Ramayanam with shadow puppets. And this is similar to what you see, of course, in Southeast Asia. And these, what they do is they recite the Kamban, and then probably people have trouble understanding it, so they describe what it says in Malayalam, and as they do that, the things are acted out with shadow puppets with a light behind a sheet, and so you see the characters doing things, and so that's and that may also have something to do with Southeast Asia.
That's very interesting. That's really, really interesting. Oh, in the same line,
you wonder, incidentally, you wonder why Bhagavati temples would be having Kamba Ramayanam, but anyway, they do.
it has spread far and wide. So I think the traders brought the books along with them. There's another question almost in the same vein. So this is from Mr. Kamalakannan. While analyzing the ancient Tamil poems, you have mentioned that there might exist a verse of Ramayana in Tamil before Kamban. So he wants to know more about that. So was there a verse on Ramayana before Kamban? Was there a work on Ramayana before Kamban?
It's not like we do have versions of Mahabharata before Viliputura, and we have even some left over from Perendevanar's Bharatam, and I think there's some evidence that there was a Bharatam even before that. It's very sad that these things have disappeared. But Ramayana is mentioned in Sangam literature, the story of Rama, several times. But whether they actually, so that obviously people were telling the story. After all, the Ramayana is the best known story in the world. And so, I mean, it's all over all over South Asia, Southeast Asia, it's a very widely known story. And but whether there was actually a Tamil version it's unlikely, because I don't think, as far as I know, I could be wrong, I've never seen it mentioned that we lost the Tamil version before Kamban.
Can I request the other participants also? Some of you are posting questions in the chat, so it'll also be nice if you can actually ask Professor in live. So if there are any questions where you want to ask live, meanwhile, Professor, I do have another question for you. So we talked about his mastery of the language. So you very beautifully elicited his mastery of the language, like Slade, descriptors, his portrayal of characters. And on the other side, we also talked about his detailing of the human emotions and the portrayal of characters. Now, which of this really inspired you, or which of this was the main reason for you to actually take the stance that he is definitely one of the world's great poets?
What was what? Sorry,
was it his mastery of the language, or was it his portrayal of characters?
Oh, I see. Well, you can't separate the two, can you? Think of Shakespeare. When people talk of Shakespeare, they talk about the extraordinary characters he creates, but they also talk about his mastery of language. I mean, the two go together, because it takes a master of language to really bring out character like that. There's one fundamental difference between Tamil and Sanskrit, which is interesting. Sanskrit, if we look at the kavyas, we look at almost all of the poetic literature in the language, and I'm talking about after the epics, because the epics are different. But for the most part, these very elegant works, they're otherworldly. They describe things that happen in mythology, things that happen with the gods. The stories, even a story like Shakuntala is a very sweet, beautiful story. But and then if you get violence in Mahabharata, you have description of human beings in very profound ways. But when you get to the poems, they tend to, well, let's go to Jagannatha, the great Alankarika, the last of the great Alankarikas in Sanskrit. I don't know if I can remember what he says. Well, let me just put it in English, because you won't understand. I mean, not many will understand the Sanskrit. He says poetry is something that gives otherworldly pleasure. And then he talks about otherworldly pleasure. He says that comes from a kind of lokotara janaka. It's something that creates this lokotara, this enjoyment or this delight that belongs to the other world. And the Tamil tends not to do this in this way. It tends to be much more realistic. Sometimes when Kamban writes, it's just as if villagers were talking to each other. And this goes all the way back to Sangam literature. When Sangam literature, when it describes village, well, it describes village life. And in the Ahananuru, which I spent years with, you read the poems and you're transported back into a Tamil village of 2,000 years ago. It's amazing thing. You absolutely are there, and you see people quarreling with each other, people fighting about their husbands running off with courtesans. You see life as it really was lived by people, and you don't see that so much in Sanskrit after the epics, especially after the Mahabharata. Maybe occasionally it comes, but not so often.
Thanks, Prof. I think with this, we are actually coming to an end to this session. So thanks to everyone for the thought-provoking questions. Now, can I request Nimi from NLB to introduce the list of recommended books?
Okay, hi, sir. Thank you so much for that beautiful presentation. We have Professor George Hart's books at the library. So if you want, you can, the books are available there. Okay, especially the Forest Book of the Ramayana of Kamban, the Points of Ancient Tamil, and several other books. Next slide, please. Okay, we have books on, these are the English copies. We have books on various aspects of Ramayana from R.K. Narayanan too, and then the illustrated Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana. Next slide. Okay, so we have the Ramayana tradition in Asia, the sacred epic of gods and demons, the Ramayana revisited, wonderful mysteries of Ramayana. Next one. And yeah, these are the other titles. We have more titles in English, so please go to the catalog to search. And then the next one is our Tamil titles. We have many copies on Kamban, Kamban's Ramayana, Kamban in Kadalan, Kamban Kattum Panbum Patiram, Kamban Kavyathil, Asai Annan Anbu Thambi, Kamban Ramayana Eliya Urai Nadayil, okay, Kamban in Atralum, ராமாயணத்தின் சிறப்பும் கம்ப ராமாயணம் மூலமும் தெளிவுரையும் புதிய பார்வை மூன்றெழுத்தில் கம்பரின் முழு காப்பியம். நெக்ஸ்ட், கம்பன் காட்டும் கணைகள், கம்பன் என்பது, அப்புறம் கம்பன் கலை. அடுத்தது ஓகே, கம்பனின் ராமன் மானுனலா மாலவனா புகழ் கம்பன் தந்த ராமாயண காவியம். ஸோ இந்த மாதிரி கம்பன் கவியமுதம், அப்புறம் கம்பன் நேற்று இன்று நாளை. ஸோ இதை விட there are other books in Tamil also on Kamban Ramayanam, so please enjoy. Thanks.
Can I add one thing?
Yes,
there's also many versions on the internet that can be downloaded as PDFs of Kamban, and some of the basic urays, the commentaries, are on the internet. So if you do a search for Kamba Ramayanam using Tamil font and then PDF after it, you'll get all sorts of editions and commentaries, some of which are very helpful.
Now, can we request all the viewers to spare a minute to participate in the feedback survey? Your feedback and suggestions are important to us to improve our events in the future. Also, please provide your contact details in the form so that we can notify you of our upcoming events.
Could I say one thing?
Yes, Prof.
Someone has a question. Jairam Jagadithan has asked, how far were you able to spread the fame of Kamban to the Western audience? This is tough because the sensibility of a South Asian is so different from a Westerner who's been brought up on Homer and Virgil and the Western tradition. So people get turned off a bit by all of the ornamentation and everything. But for a South Asian, that's just natural. Without the ornamentation, it wouldn't be there. It would be like eating a potato with no spice, just boiling a potato and eating it, which is the way a friend of ours, someone fed him a boiled potato and he couldn't figure out how people could eat it. So there is a big cultural divide and it's hard to cross it.
Professor George Hart, thank you so much for your very, very insightful and very passionate talk. You can see the love of Tamil oozing in all your renditions. Your lifetime work really means a lot to us, and it has instigated us to stop, realize, and appreciate our own language, the heritage, and our sense of identity and culture. Thanks again. So,
Well, thank you. And I enjoyed talking to all of you. And, you know, it's always nice to talk about Tamil because it's such a rich and wonderful tradition.
thanks so much. And this event would not be possible without the support of our partner, the ever efficient National Library Board of Singapore, and the volunteers of CSTC, and our very, very receptive audience. And this event would not have been a success without you, the participants. Thank you. And we hope you will join our future events. We have a lot of events lined up. So please follow our pages where you can actually find. And Professor will be meeting soon. Nandri, Vanakkam. Can I
Vanakkam.
request?
And thanks to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nandri.